So, tell me about you. Who are you?
Well, who I am. I'm a mechanic by day.
Mhm.
Um, Considered a cross-dresser by night, although I don't really consider myself a typical cross-dresser.
Why is that?
Well, I'll go out in some sort of girl mode quite a bit, whether I have a wig on or some sort of mascara or top or something. So,
So? There's like full-time dressers that are.
well, when I came out and started dealing with this in my own terms or whatever, I went out completely, girl mode, makeup, everything, and hung out at the bars. And it literally, the first time I went out, it took me 2 hours just to cross the space of 10 feet from my front door to my truck because I was so nervous to go out. Nowadays, I go out quite a bit. Sometimes I'll wear a wig, sometimes I won't. Most of the time I'm usually in some sort of women's top or kind of a gender confusion, I like to call it. So, gender queer, gender confusion.
Right.
So,
How old were you How old were you when you went out for the first time, where it was hard to take those first steps?
well, that was 7, 8 years ago.
Mhm.
But I've been doing this. Well, I started when I was probably about 9, 10 years old.
Mhm.
And back in Utah, it was, sneak out and do it or whatever when I was a kid and that. But
Sneak out to where?
we had fields all around, so it was just, sneak around the fields or whatever, in my sister's dresses or something. And it was about high school. I buried it. Late part of junior high school, I just buried it, denied it because I got caught once. And
Who'd you get caught by?
some kids in the neighborhood.
What happened?
Oh, it was teasing, a little bit of bullying. Basically, I wasn't really raped, but it was, I ended up sucking them all off and got shit about it for a year or so, and I kind of buried it down and tried to avoid them. And
How many boys were there?
there's 3.
There were 3?
Yeah.
And this was prior to high school?
Right, yeah. It was
And-
probably 7th, 8th grade, right in there.
So, do you remember the very first time you even considered it? Like what that was like? You went into your mom's room and you saw a dress. How did it come about?
Oh, it was more my mom's nightgowns, camisoles, and stuff like that. It was like set up a tent in the backyard, sneak some of mom's clothes or my sister's dresses out, camp out in the tent and wear that stuff.
And that's when you were young, 8 or 9?
Oh yeah, 8, 9 years old.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the first time you thought about it. You said, And what can you describe to me what it was that you saw? Was it a sexual thing? Was it that's a pretty dress?
I don't know if I'd really say it was a sexual thing that young. I guess I'd equate it more to just wanting to be pretty. Growing up playing with the so-called G.I. Joes and all that, it was okay, but there was other parts of me that from time to time wanted to play with the Barbies. Didn't do it a whole lot, but part of I always loved dress up with my cousins to some degree or whatever. So it was just a way, I guess, looking back on it, I guess it was a way of exploring a different side don't think I really realized it back then.
It just was.
Right.
So,
I knew it was wrong, but
right, right.
so.
Now, do you separate being gay and being a crossdresser? Are those two different things, or do they come in?
I don't really. I wouldn't say I separate them. I know there's a lot within the transgender community that it is a big separation. Most of them are attracted to women. I only want to be with women. The thought of being with a man just is, unless they're in total dress mode or something. So I don't really separate the two. I mean, gay, I like men. I also like to dress and present as a woman to some degree.
Are you attracted to women?
I think they're very pretty, attractive. So I wouldn't say I wouldn't rule out having a relationship with a woman, but they don't really do for me what I would want. I mean, I've been married, have 2 kids. I definitely know what it's like to be with a woman.
Oh, interesting. How long were you married for?
About 8 years.
8 years, and how old were you when you got married?
Ooh, 25, 26,
How
25.
old are your kids?
18 and 14.
18 and 14. They know about your lifestyle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
How do they deal with that?
At first I think it was strange for them.
How old were they when you killed them?
Probably about 10 and 6.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It was about 8 years ago. Shortly after I came out and started dealing with this myself. So, and getting, for them to see me all dressed up one time, which was kind of a sheer accident, went out to the clubs and got a call, had to leave the club, go back to the ex's house, deal with the kids, whatever. And that was their first. They knew before, but that was the first time really seeing me.
Sure.
And my oldest one, to her at that point in time, it was no big deal. And my littlest one, she was a little taken aback by it at first, but
Did she ask questions? How did she respond the first time she saw it?
well, the first time she asked me is like, "Daddy, why are you wearing a dress?"
That's a good question.
Yeah,
Right.
because I want to. Okay. And went about her business, you know.
Right.
So it's just became the norm. So.
How did your ex-wife respond?
Oh, she. It basically destroyed our relationship.
Oh, you told her before you got divorced?
Oh yeah. I mean, I told her I was gay and cross-dressing and this and that. She tried to deal with it, but she couldn't at the time. And there was a few years of bitterness and anger, but now with the passage of time, we're basically almost best friends. I mean, there's no animosity there at all. So
Did you want her to stay in the relationship?
at the time I did, because me, myself, and I was scared to deal with it
Sure.
alone.
Yeah.
And after we separated and all that, I truly felt alone.
Right.
So,
Sure. Yeah.
And being in the military didn't help any either. So.
Oh, you were, did you travel a lot in the military?
Oh, right. So
All over the
Germany.
world, or?
No, pretty much just Europe.
So, you were 8 or 9
Mm-hmm.
when you started to dress up,
Right.
and at that time, you didn't think gay before
No,
that. It
no.
was women's clothes first.
Right.
When did you start questioning your sexuality itself?
Oh, that would have been high school. I started having thoughts, feelings about having sex with guys. Um, but growing up in Utah, it was like I knew at that point in time what gay was and how wrong it was. Although I'm sure my mother would have been perfectly fine with it because my mother was very loving. And after I'd gone into the military, had a kid, I call him a stepbrother, even though he never truly was a brother. But he moved, he was one of my sister's best friends, and he moved into my room because he was a transfer student, little Indian kid, and he was openly gay at the time. And my dad didn't have a problem with him, although I think my dad would have had a problem with me if I would have came out. But
Sure.
my mom wouldn't have. My grandparents, on the other hand, would have. So.
The 3 boys that you talked about that caught you and you had sex with them, that was in high school or prior to high school?
That was junior high.
Junior high. Did that follow you through in high school? Was it talked about, joked about, or it just happened and they let it go? Cause
I'd say pretty much after about a year, they let it go. But by the time I was in high school, they would have been, when I started high school, they would have been in their senior year.
Oh, they were older.
Right, yeah.
Right.
So after that, they weren't really around. So, and then even when at the time they weren't really around, other than they were, one of the boys was a older brother of someone I was in scouting with. And we did, even in scouts and all that, before that, we did experimentation, you know.
Oh, that wasn't your first sexual experience?
Oh, no.
Right.
I mean,
But it was
boys would always kind of mess around, you know.
Right.
So.
It was always in male clothing, though.
Right,
Right.
yes.
Okay. And so, do you feel that homosexuality, there's, nature versus nurture. Do you feel the same? How do you feel about being a cross-dresser? Nature, nurture?
I haven't really thought of it. I mean, I know from what I've read and other transgendered people that I've talked to, some of them have felt they were the wrong sex in the wrong body from a very early age. And I never really felt like I was in the wrong body. I always felt comfortable wearing women's clothes, girls' clothes at the time, but I never really felt like I was in the wrong body, like some.
You were fine with penis. You didn't want.
Oh yeah, I enjoy peeing standing up.
Right.
so yeah.
Okay. And so, So there's transvestite, there's cross-dresser, there's transgender.
Right.
Define all these for me.
Well, I can only give you my definitions of them, and I mean transvestite has more of a sexual stigmatism to it, like doing it just for sexual gratification. Cross-dresser, wearing women's clothes to dress up. Some get a sexual high or gratification out of it, others don't. Some of them do it and go out to the clubs and enjoy it, and just the experience of being out different. Transgendered is a whole range of categories. That would include, for my definition, would include transvestites, cross-dressers, anybody that doesn't flow in the binary of the male-female gender system.
Sure.
So, I mean, butch lesbians that are in t-shirts and jeans and very masculine, to me, fall in that category.
Sure.
So, it's transgendered as a whole broader term, I guess, from my definition of it.
Right. So, difficult to come to terms with.
Mm-hmm.
You were how old when you made that first step out of the house to the?
Oh, I was probably late 30s. So I was here in Atlanta when first time as an adult, came out dressed.
Right. So prior to that, were you in relationships? Prior to that, was it just at home? Were you by yourself and you dress up at home?
It was typically by myself. And at that time, I guess it'd be more because I did it so little or so few times that it was more for sexual gratification at that time. So yeah, it was mainly, I had to go out of town or something. I'd get dressed up. And sometimes I would wear some article of clothing, undergarments typically, and all that.
So when you are sexual, are you always in women's clothing or partly in women's clothing?
Partly. I mean, I wear outside of work, I wear predominantly women's clothing anyway.
Okay. So you get up in the morning and you go to work dressed fully as a man.
Right.
And then you come home after work.
Yeah, shower up, clean up, and throw on a blouse and jeans. You can throw on the bra and all that.
So I call you up and I say, hey, what are you doing tonight? You want to go to Denny's? What happens?
Well, depending on what time and all that, and what time I got home from work, I'd probably, if it's during the week, middle of the week, I wouldn't throw on the full wig and makeup. But I'd definitely be out in women's jeans and a blouse. Maybe some eyeshadow and stuff. And definitely earrings.
Sure. How about family weddings, Thanksgiving?
Well, now, typically, like when I go down to family-oriented stuff, spend with the kids, whatever, I'll typically be in male mode.
Strictly 100%.
Right. Yeah. No, we've gone on vacations down to Florida at the beach or whatever, and I'll go out in my bikini. I don't care.
And
I'll
a
lay
female,
out on the beach.
And a female.
You're right. Yeah. Go out to the restaurants and stuff like that where I'm with friends.
So how do you ever get scared? Do you ever get uncomfortable in certain environments?
Oh yeah. I mean, I won't go into the local gas station in complete dress mode because it's too close to home, I guess. But I'll, from time to time, when we go to the grocery store, I'll go in my gender confusion mode. So yeah, it's and I generally don't go someplace by myself. I'm usually with at least one or two other people.
So do you when you're out as a woman as opposed to as a man, do you feel differently? Do you act differently, or?
Yeah, I would say I probably act how I feel is a little more effeminate, a little more flippant, I guess. Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm probably not as effeminate as some people are, and I know people could definitely tell I'm a man in a dress, but I'll generally act a little softer, I guess.
Do you have folks that do the second glance and move on, and then you have the folks that can't get past it or stare just a little bit too long?
Well, when I go out in a definite gender confusion mode, where I do it, like we went to Asheville for New Year's, and went on one of the, not the Biltmore, but the other hotel there. And I went into definite gender confusion mode, and I typically tend to just, it doesn't really bother me most of the time when people do a second glance sort of thing, because that's what I'm there to do. Now my partner tends to get a little more irritated with people's glancing or talking, to their friends or whatever, sort of thing, than I do. Me, I know it's gonna happen, so it's just
right. He does that in a protective way.
Yeah, I think so. He gets, when somebody does a double take or a snicker or something, he'll take more offense to it than I will. Me, it's just, I'm throwing a sense of gender in their face, what's genderly appropriate, and so I expect reactions like that to some degree.
Sure. You said a second ago that's what you intend to do. Tell me more about that.
Well, sometimes I'll go out, like the other night, went out in definitely all women's clothing, didn't have the wig on. I don't even know if I did the makeup, but I had on the bra and all that. And so definitely, you could tell I was in women's clothing. Even when we were in Asheville, you could tell it was a guy. Although in Asheville I had makeup and the wig on, but you could definitely tell I'm a guy. But here's a guy that's wearing a women's blouse. So it was just, I felt comfortable, and that's what I did it for. But I know going out in that mode, it's going to get second glances, sneers maybe sometimes.
Right. What is your intention, though? You said this is what you intend to do. What is the intention of it?
Just to basically, I wouldn't really say I intend to fuck with people's sense of what's genderly appropriate, but I guess it kind of does. Because socially, from my perspective, it's socially more acceptable for a woman to wear men's clothing than it is for a man to wear women's clothing.
Right.
So I'll tend to just say the hell with it and wear women's clothing and go out.
So some people would say that's a throw it in your face. Are you trying to throw it in their face? In a kind of controversial way?
Kinda. Although I don't really do it that way on purpose. I do it more because it's just what I want to wear.
Right.
But I know by me wearing it, it's going to throw it in people's faces. So,
so I guess one of the questions kind of going through my head is that you go out knowing that people look at you and say that's a guy in women's clothes. Would you prefer to not be that and be someone who could wear women's clothes and people not necessarily notice that you're a guy in women's clothes?
Sometimes I would. Yeah, there's times I would, but to me, even when I get completely dressed up and all that, I look in the mirror and I still see the guy in the dress, although maybe from a distance somebody might not look at me or see me as that, especially in the evenings. But as soon as I start talking, it's out the window trying to pass. So.
Yeah. So, what do you see when you look in the mirror, besides the guy in a dress?
Well, me, myself, and I think sometimes I look pretty good. But I can still see the beard shadow and the square jaws and the Adam's apple. And so, but it's like, I'm trying to get prettied up to some degree, and so that's what I go for.
So, do you consider yourself emotionally healthy?
I would sure like to think so. Yeah, I do. So.
Did you always feel that way?
Well, when I got separated and divorced, there was about a year year and a half that I was going through counseling that I didn't think so. So, yeah. So I think so now.
Right. So what would you say if one of your, you have two daughters, so that's not really a good example because it's just more socially acceptable for a girl to wear a t-shirt. But tell me, if you had a son, what would you say to them if you found out that they wanted to wear women's clothes?
Well,
and would you want that?
I kind of got an example. A lesbian couple, they've raised their younger son, who they haven't. He definitely likes to wear or play with boys' toys, and he likes to play with the girls' toys and get dressed up. So they hasn't forced what is socially acceptable. And the only thing I could say is, I mean, great for them. But, and hopefully being his age, it's not going to be as tough a road. It'll be a lot more acceptable to be cross-gendered in a way. But even if it was my son, I'd say, basically do what you want to do, but be very careful.
Right.
So.
Now, when you grew up, you were around the world, or mostly in Germany and Europe, you said?
Yeah.
Things were more tolerant over in Europe, I would think, than here in the United States.
They seem to be where I was at and all that. Yeah.
Were you able to? Did you go to any support groups? Did you meet other folks that cross-dress?
I did online and went to a couple of the clubs in Germany. And one good thing about it was, it was like I left the barracks with my bag, went out of town, went to the club, and actually was able to change in the club.
Sure.
And spent the evening in the club, and then it's, take it all off, throw it in the bag, get changed to men's clothing, and head
What
back.
was that like for you to be in an environment that I assume would be completely comfortable, right? As opposed to being out, in the world here?
Well, out there it was, especially when I first started going out, it was more, I was more scared to death.
Of what?
Of people. And especially not knowing it, knowing anybody really here, new to Atlanta. And back then, I tried a lot harder to pass, even though I knew I couldn't. So when I first started going out, there was a bit more fear to it. Like it was typically get dressed, wait for it to get dark, go to the truck, head to the club, leave the club, come home. There was no stops in between going to the gas station or 24-hour drugstore or whatever.
Sure.
It was completely out of the question, man. Nowadays, no big deal most of the time.
Do you ever wish that you didn't have this desire?
When I first came out, yeah. In dealing with my past, growing up as a Mormon, I really questioned it and really wished I didn't. But nowadays, it's more of just part of who I am.
Sure.
I've met a lot of people who are very open, accepting, know me for what I am, and don't judge me on it.
Right.
So,
What was it like to grow up Mormon?
well, I say I grew up Mormon. I wasn't raised staunch Mormon. My dad was raised Mormon, but my mother was Catholic. And so I didn't go to church every Sunday, but my grandparents on my dad's side, um, whenever we stayed over at Grandma and Grandpa's house, we always went to church. So it was had a strong Mormon upbringing, but I wasn't truly raised Mormon.
When you were in church or doing anything religious, were you like, oh my God, I can't be this because God says I shouldn't?
Yeah, more so when I was junior high school time frame. I mean, I didn't get baptized as Mormon until I was 16, and that was just mainly due to peer pressure. Kids in the neighborhood, because I wasn't part of their church ward, all of a sudden I became an outsider, was being pushed around, picked on, avoided to some degree. And so to try and fit in, I eventually went through the steps and got baptized as Mormon. And a few years later, I met, especially in high school, once I started driving, met other friends and got away from the Mormon. So,
Were you lonely as a child?
yeah, I'd say I probably was.
Brothers and sisters?
I had one sister, so no brothers.
Right.
So,
Were you guys close?
I think we were when we were younger, but I think everything started separating once we became teenagers. And I went my own way, and she went her way. And it was about 10 years or more where we didn't really talk. It's just been this past year or 2 years that we've been in conversations. And
Who reached out to who?
I reached out to her.
Yeah.
So
Why do you think that you did that, and why do you think you guys are able to have conversations now?
well, part of it was the forum, landmark forum that I went through. Just made me realize that here I am holding all this stuff against her and not letting her be her, and I just decided to give it up and called her, and we've talked, and we're actually, I wouldn't say we're as close now as we were when we were pre-teens, but we're a lot closer than we were.
So, do you understand the discomfort, the judgment that people have against cross-dressers?
Yeah, I do. It's like a lot of things that are outside the norm. They're feared. Well, I perceive it as mainly fear. It's not within the norm. Men should be this way and women should be this way. Anything that doesn't quite fit them too is either typically ridiculed or viewed with skepticism and fear. So,
what would you, if you had an opportunity to sit down one-on-one with prejudiced people, what would you say to them? What would you want them to know?
that basically I'm just a person too, just trying to live my life and be happy in my life while I'm here on this earth. I mean, I try not to judge people for what they do or how they look. And sometimes it can be hard, especially if they're angry people or very judgmental and condemning. it's hard to get past that. But,
Right.
so,
Big bullying campaign going on. Everyone's talking about being bullied. There's court case going on right now. I think it was Rutgers student that killed himself.
mm-hmm.
Do you wish that was in place when you were younger? How do you see that right now?
Yeah, it would have been nice. Yeah, because I mean, there was in the school I went to. It was, from my perspective, the cliques. You had, your cowboy or mainly cowboy redneck clique and your jocks, and I used to get pushed around and bullied by the cowboys at the time. And from my perspective of the group. So, I mean, it was to have it not back in them days, just not being the norm for boys or even the norm for high school.
Mm-hmm.
It probably would have opened up a lot more sense of freedom around all this.
Mm-hmm. So describe when you were being bullied, when you were being ostracized would be the word. Describe that to me as a child looking back as an adult. What was that like for you? How did it affect you today?
Well, I'm sure it still affects me to some degree because I don't like being around people that are mean or angry. And when somebody starts to get angry, I'll back away in a hurry and try and extricate myself from the situation. So a lot, it put some fear in me. It was very scary. I know I'd spent a few nights going home and crying because of the bullying.
Did you know what you were crying about, besides the fact that someone was being mean to you? Did it?
I don't really think, I don't know if I did or not back then. I was always kind of timid and shy as a kid, so it was probably more alone wondering why they were always picking on me.
Do you know which came first, the timid and the shy, or the realization that you were different?
I would probably say the timid and shy came first.
So relationships. When how long have you been in a relationship?
I've been with my partner Craig now for 4 years. Yeah, 4 years.
And where did you meet?
I actually met through a friend of ours. I was living with, I was renting a room from a lesbian couple friend of mine, and he happened to live around the corner, and met through a mutual friend, and we started dating, and that was 4 years ago. So.
Yeah. So the first time you met, were you dressed as a man or dressed as a woman?
I was more man, in more of a man clothing. Although I did have on I guess it was more of a unisex coat, but I had my bra and fake titties in at the time. So.
Right.
So yeah, I was in some sort of gender confusion, but
he had
definitely
an idea.
More male.
He had an idea that you were a little different.
Right.
And have you ever been in a relationship or started a relationship where they didn't know where you shared, or is it boom right off the bat?
Well, since it ended my relationship with my ex, and that was the big reason why, since then, every relationship I've been in, outside of work, and not talking just strictly intimate any friendship, basically, any some sort of relationship, whether it's sexual or not, personal, I try and always be upfront about it. I don't want to hide it anymore. So,
Have you ever been shot down?
yeah, actually I have.
Tell me about that.
Well, it was depressing. I mean, here I was just letting them know who I am and not wanting to hide and deny it to anyone, mainly to me, but not have it be an issue for them, and they just couldn't deal with it, and I went through a little bit of like, oh fuck, why do I have to be like this? What's wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
But that was also in the time frame when I was it was right towards the end of my counseling.
You've been in therapy?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I went. I'll say one thing about the military that was good is I went through a counselor, and they kept it all private and all that until it was time for me to get out.
Mm-hmm. Were they supportive of it? Did they?
The counselor was
hospital?
very supportive of it. Because of don't ask, don't tell. At the time, when I finally came out and all that, I knew when I came out that it was going to be, it would get me discharged. My first sergeant wanted nothing to do with me. Luckily, my CO and XO, commanding officer and executive officer, were very friendly, were very helpful. They definitely wanted to do what was best for me and not strictly for the military. So
the job you have is very masculine, right?
yes,
Yeah, can't get much more masculine.
very anti this.
Do your coworkers know?
I haven't told them flat out. I'm sure they have some suspicion, one way or another.
Why would they have suspicion?
Well, because I got pierced ears and I'll wear small hoops. And that from time to time, especially around Halloween, I've gone in with done, fake nails on, and so.
Did they ever ask? Did they ever say, what is that?
Well, I've had them ask about the nails, and especially my shaving of legs and my arms and that. But like the nails, I've always just been able to pass it off as, especially around Halloween, as
Halloween.
a costume when I was a vampire, or something.
Do you wish you could come out to them and be?
Yeah.
At least know it. I don't know. You probably couldn't dress that way on the job.
No.
I would assume, right?
I mean, working, I wouldn't dress this way anyway. But yeah, I mean, there's part of me that wishes I could, but knowing the environment, it probably won't happen in my lifetime. So.
Right. So tell me about like you've got like you're almost like Clark Kent from Superman, or it's like two lives at times.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you have two lives?
Oh yeah, very much so.
Which life do you prefer better?
I prefer this one because to me it's more of an honest me. I'm good in my other life, but I can't really be me. Mm-hmm. It's always kind of there's a bit of suppression with my other life. Mm-hmm. So, sometimes if I go out in Atlanta area, I'm not so worried about it, but if we go out to down south of Atlanta, McDonough, or elsewhere, I tend to worry because I know where a lot of the fellow employees live and all that. Mm-hmm. So I always, especially if I'm in girl mode or so, it was,
right.
Especially when more so when I lived down there, I should say.
Mm-hmm. So as far as your safety goes, you have concerns about that at times?
Yeah.
Do you carry any sort of weapon, mace, taser, gun?
No. I mean, when I was going out, when I first got here, I was going out by myself. I used to have a pistol, and I always carried it with me. But now that my world's gotten bigger and I know a lot more people, and I'll generally go out with friends and stuff, I don't really feel there's a real need.
Right.
Maybe some mace would be a good thing, but yeah, let them out real quick.